Before we were planning this episode, you came up to me one day and you told me, dude, I just saw this really cool thing that's going to revolutionize the industry. And I was like, dude, okay, well, he's gone crazy once again, you know?
Yo, Max, what's
Bro,
good?
it's been a minute, man.
It's been a minute.
I'm quite happy we're doing this today.
Yeah, I'm very happy as well. I mean, we got some interesting topics planned,
yeah,
and
it's a special one. But I have a question
fun.
for you.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. When was
Sure.
the last time you flew?
Oof, that has been a minute.
Really?
That has been a minute. I mean, you know I love flying. You know I
Yeah,
love
dude.
planes, and
Dude, for everyone who doesn't know, Guy is super into planes. Every
Yes,
time he's at an
yes.
airport, I get a nice little snap. And I appreciate that, dude.
yeah,
I do
honestly,
appreciate that.
honestly, I mean, I love it, and it's been a long time, especially since like I've flown like a big plane.
Dude.
It's been a long
Yeah,
time.
dude. I mean, COVID-19 hit in the beginning of 2020, and
Yeah.
it really impacted the airline industry,
Yeah.
dude. Like, we saw some major developments, and it got slowed down, man.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely tough for the airline industry. I mean, lots of people got laid off.
Yeah, dude.
I mean, passenger demand and the amount of airplanes in the air dramatically reduced. I mean, it was definitely very interesting, very crazy situation.
Dude, when was the last time you flew, like, a long-haul flight?
Dude, those big ones, I can't even remember.
Really?
Honestly.
You know, for me, it was in January of 2020. I
Mm.
flew from Frankfurt to Shanghai. Been here for 2.5 years, dude.
Dude, that's crazy. 2.5 years already.
Yeah, it's
Feels like
crazy, right?
nothing,
Time
though.
flies
Feels
like
like
that,
nothing.
man.
Time
But
flies.
it's absolutely crazy. So
No,
yeah,
and it's funny you mentioned the A380 because, like, you know, that was just before the pandemic, and, you know, passenger demand, like I said, dramatically decreased, and 747 and the A380s are the class
yeah, of course,
of the airline industry. I mean, they're the biggest planes ever created.
of course, dude.
I mean, 800, 700 people can fit in those planes, and it's just crazy. But due to low demand, they have been struggling
You
with
see,
the A380s.
I feel like there's this huge thing, this kind of dilemma I see with flying. And it's sort of this concept of, okay, it gets you everywhere really fast, and there's no real good alternative.
Yeah.
But it is not very sustainable. Like, of course, you can do carbon offsetting. Sure, you can really engage in that, but it still is not good for the environment the way we're planning it today. We're having so many tons of emissions. I think I read this figure at some point. It's amazing how much carbon emission, 2.5% of carbon emission.
And I know that 2.5 doesn't sound like a big number, but I can guarantee that that's a lot of carbon and carbon dioxide being
Dude, yeah.
put into there. And it's definitely like an issue. I mean, especially going on now, we're knowing more and more about global warming.
Yeah, dude.
So it's definitely something that needs to be targeted.
Yeah, no. And, you know, I remember before we were planning this episode, you came up to me one day and you told me, dude, I just saw this really cool thing that's going to revolutionize the industry. And I was like, dude, okay, well, he's gone crazy once again, you know. But tell me about it, dude. So you told me about hydrogen engines and planes. Right?
Yes. So then pretty much what we do, how an engine works right now is through combustion. And how it creates that much force is pretty much like a controlled explosion, where it uses gasoline, which can be in the form, for example, butane. Is a type of gas that is easily explosive. And what happens is that you inject it with air, with gasoline, and then you light it, and there's like a mini explosion inside the engine where it pushes a lot of air particles.
Okay.
And of course it's very general, very basic,
Yeah,
but that is essentially how it produces lift. But how it produces thrust.
Yeah.
But there is, of course, a downside that it emits a lot
Of
of
course.
carbon dioxide.
Now let me understand this, right? Like I don't really have that great of a science background, you know. the bit of science I do, I really struggle with it.
Yeah.
So how does hydrogen, this thing I only know from H2O, really come into play here?
I mean, hydrogen is going to pretty much replace gasoline. I
Wow.
mean, yeah. It's a very interesting, very complicated subject
Yeah.
that, I mean, we could talk about for 30, 40
Of
minutes.
course, especially you. I mean, I can imagine. We
Of
probably have to
course.
calm it down a bit.
Yeah. But essentially, it's a replacement for gasoline, and it emits substantially less, not carbon dioxide, it doesn't emit carbon dioxide, but about those harmful gases that emit substantially less than a normal engine does.
So I might be old school, right? But I watch quite a bit of F1, and yeah, dude, F1. But they're introducing sustainable fuels. Excuse me, these SAF fuels, right?
Yep.
So What's the difference between hydrogen fuel and SAF fuels?
Well, SF fuels that it essentially is reduce reuse recycle.
Okay.
It uses things that it uses sorry materials or substances that have been
course.
used before and are just reusing them again to
Of
create.
course.
So you can keep on using it, using it, using it.
Okay.
So it is a very green alternative, but again, it's not completely clean. I mean, it does use some jet fuel, just use some hydrocarbons and combines them to create a more sustainable alternative for normal jet fuels.
Yeah, dude, that's super interesting. And I read through this a bit too, and I saw that Airbus is testing right now, and they're testing their net zero passenger aircraft
Yes.
by 2035. That's not too far away.
2035. I mean, it sounds like what 13 more years, but in terms of aviation, that is a short timeline.
Yeah, no.
And I mean, they're setting their hopes high, and hopefully they can pull through.
Yeah, I mean, and that would be really great to see, right? Because we've not really seen that much innovation in terms of the propulsion in the airline industry, right? We've seen a lot in other ways. We've seen the interiors being redesigned, all that stuff, but we really haven't seen a change since a very long time ago that in the way that engines are manufactured.
Yeah, and again, like of course there is improvements. Like they want to create a more efficient airplane, right? And the engine is the part that creates the emissions. So then, these are just the many solutions that they're pursuing. I mean, sustainable aircraft fuels, and as well as the hydrogen engines, and they're very innovative solutions that hopefully we'll be able to implement into the real world.
Yeah, I mean, and let's face it, the airline industry has to change. We're facing a globally internationalized world that's constantly focusing on really getting better at doing less carbon emissions.
Yeah.
Of course, there are countries that take it more seriously and less seriously, but at the end of the day, we all have the same target.
Yeah.
Now, Elliot Lies, the president of this great corporation that focuses on these SAF fuels,
Yep.
said that somewhere in 2030, hydrogen will be comparable in cost to jet fuel. Now let's look at the business side of this. What do you think could the change in the industry be through that?
Yeah, well, I think right now, they have been introducing some more sustainable. Of course, it's not the level that he's referring to.
Yeah.
But more sustainable fuels. But the problem is that the costs are so high.
Yeah.
I mean, if I could pay $200 to go from Miami to New York, or I could pay $500.
Yeah.
Which one would I pay?
Exactly.
$200.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, and it's also a very complicated design to design the prices.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, we know a certain amount, but nothing to what the experts and the people who work for them know.
Yeah,
so then, I think in terms of the per day costs to the consumers, to the people who will fly on the airplanes, it'll by 2030, it'll be very similar.
Yeah, I think we actually have to consider the entire magnitude of this issue, right? Time magazine said that aviation is considered one of the hardest sectors to in the global economy to decarbonize because of the fuels and the technology that are far cheaper in the counterparts than the ones that are being designed right now.
Yeah.
And I mean, Airbus is taking a huge leap here, right? And that's what we need. We need in this global economy that's constantly developing. We need risk takers. We need those Elon Musks that just say no. We're not conforming to the standard values. And you wouldn't expect that from Airbus necessarily with a very traditional background. But I found it interesting. They were talking about what they want to focus on, and they really said, look, we want to focus on regional aircraft because we have to be realistic with this. We actually want to implement this. This is not just a PR stunt. We want to actually be able to implement this, be sustainable, and I think that's such a great move.
And it's great to hear from one of those worldwide companies, those famous companies. I mean, the airline business is a cutthroat business, and there's two large guys, Airbus and Boeing, and if Airbus is taking a risk by investing in these fuels and investing in more efficient airliners and different types of airliners, then I think it's a big risk, tough risk, but hopefully if it works out, Boeing can follow through, Bombardier can follow through, and more companies will follow in their footsteps that will help push the world forward and create a more sustainable environment for us.
And I mean, let's look at the business case here. Airbus has been declining in stock. Their stock has not been healthy. They've seen a bunch of people shorting their stock. It's not a healthy position they're in. So I think this move can actually be something to save the company. I think it can be a new future, a new ideology for the future. And I think connecting that to such a traditional company it would be a really great move.
Yes, it would. And by then, I think the world will hopefully have caught up with Airbus and with these companies like Tesla who are moving forward and attempting to change the world one step at a time.
Yeah.
It's just great to hear that one of these large companies are doing that.
And I mean, let's face it, these changes are 30, 40 years away, right? It's not really necessarily that, but it's more costly. We have to redesign aircrafts, but I love the initiative. So, yeah dude.
So hopefully by then we'll have, by those years, we'll have a good understanding of these sustainable fuels and these other alternatives to jet fuels.
Yeah, dude. And I hope you guys learned something. Thank you for listening. Thank you so much. We would love to have you on another platform, for example, Spotify, Apple Music. Just come and listen. We post a podcast almost every 2 weeks, and we hope you learned something. So see you around next time.
Thank you.